Hi everyone, my name is James Feeney. Welcome to or back to my channel. I recently posted a video showing you guys my tarot tools or tools that I find essential for tarot. And now that we are into spring, I know a lot of us with sacred spaces and altars are changing them up or taking stock of the tools that we have at our disposal and which ones we want to use, how we use them, and I know that there are seasonal shifts for any sort of magical, spiritual, energetic practitioners out there, whatever your title or whatever your identifying title might be. And so I, as somebody who falls under that category, was going through my altar, and I had this sort of thought of, especially with my depth year and being conscientious about working deeper and more with items that I have, what items, if I was forced to say, really consolidate, would be my mainstay things and things that I end up using a lot. And so I just looked at the tools that I find that I'm using on a regular basis and which ones I would feel very lost without. So I've selected a few, I think it's somewhere between 5 and 8 tools that I wanted to share with you guys and let you guys know why they're essential for me, and it'll give you an idea, I guess, of the types of things I do, the magical practices and workings that I am engaged in. So I thought that would be interesting, and also I'd be very curious to know in the comments or in any form what kind of tools you guys use and which ones are essential for you, because there are so many and we are all so different. So whereas with the tarot tools that I mentioned, I think a lot of those are tools that a lot of us use. For example, reading cloths, I think that's something that's pretty standard that a lot of readers of cards will use, and things like that. But with magical tools, I think there is a greater diversity and options as far as what we work with, depending on where we're drawing from, what traditions and practices we feel called to. So I'm going to share mine and get into that. So without further ado, we will start with a big one for me is a cauldron, or specifically my working cauldron. So this one, I have another cauldron that's a bit bigger, and I don't use it as much for active workings, but it's on my other altar. But overall, the idea and what a cauldron is to me is very important in my magical practice. I think that in a lot of this, a big theme will be fire, and I think that's the element I feel the most drawn to and wind up working with. I associate myself with that element a lot. I feel very drawn to it. I feel like that's one that I feel very in touch and attuned to. And I guess, well, I'm a fire sign, so not that means that that's the reason, but I just find it to be something that I kind of think about. So yeah, a cauldron. And the way that I use the cauldron a lot of times is with fire magic. So I will put something in here that I want to burn, whether that be a group of herbs that I've ground up, or free loose incense. It might be herbs and also a paper or something that I've written on a piece of parchment. There are a lot of different ways that I use it. A lot of time there's fire going on in here, and I like the cauldron because of course it makes it safe and easy to do things like fire magic in a small and contained way, and you can put the lid on and all is well. So I like it for that. And then also there's the more symbolic use of the cauldron that I will sometimes call upon, and that's actually so opposite to say what it does in fire magic, where I'm using it as this vessel to burn items and things in a more ritualistic ceremonial setting for in that way. But when I'm using it in the more symbolic way of it's a lot more connected to the water element as this sort of place of creation and return and abundance, and where, like, I'm trying to think of the right ways to describe what it means symbolically, at least to me. I know there are popular and widespread connotations, but I know we all interact with things in nuanced, unique ways, and so I view it almost as like that vessel, almost like a womb, so to speak, in a very spiritual sense. And so in that way it is quite feminine, at least in my opinion, and I think many will agree when I'm using it in that way. But it is funny that there is that duality of where I would say connect it with water when I'm using it a lot more symbolically as a sort of structure or an item and what it means, and then when I'm physically sometimes using it and I'm using it for the purposes of fire, it does feel a lot more masculine. So it's a very versatile tool for me, and I find that I use it quite often, and I really wouldn't know what to do without it. I think a lot of my workings involve the cauldron in some way, so that's my first one. Next, and of a similar vein, we have a mortar and pestle, and for me, I think this goes hand in hand with the cauldron, and just I'm constantly working with herbs, dried herbs, leaves, small sort of natural items that need to be ground up so that they can either burn or be put into sachets and packets and bottles. And this I find is like an unsung hero where I don't necessarily think of it as so magical, yet I'm using it in magical workings often, and so I've started to actually make it a more ritualized experience when I am doing the grinding and crushing of the various herbs and natural materials. I believe this is made of marble, this one, and there's so many cool ones out there, and part of me wants to invest in a bigger one, although I don't think I will because I don't think right now I actually need it as much as I think it would be nice. So along with all these things, for example, these are the tools and that's what I'm sharing, but I mean this would be useless if I didn't have those natural materials. So those I would consider supplies, like various herbs or sachets to put things in, or bottles. Those to me are more supplies, and these are mainstay tools that you'll use again and again. So that's why I'm not mentioning, say, specific herbs and supply items. But if that's something that interests you and you want to know what kind of herbs and things like that I like to work with the most, I would be more than happy to share. But yeah, mortar and pestle, and a lot of times things that happen in here will go in sachets and bottles, and they might be burned. There's so many other options, but yeah, it's a big one for me. Next is a wand, and I would say that when you open, say, traditional or Wiccan derived or a lot of those types of books, so many will mention a wand, an athame, a pentacle, and a chalice, or something to that effect to represent the four elements. And I have all four of those, and I do use all four of those, especially symbolically in terms of the elements and in other various ways. But I would say the one that I use the most consistently and almost every single time I'm working with magic is the wand. I associate it with the element of fire. I know some associate it with the element of air. As a tarot reader, I think that's part of the influence, but also to me it just feels very fiery. When I look at an athame, I think about it cutting through air, moving through the air very decisively and deftly, because it has that edge and can almost move at faster rates through what air is. And so that's why part of, in my mental image, why I connect the wand with fire as opposed to an athame. Plus, wands are usually made of wood. Wood can burn. It's that big material that we associate with the creation of fire and being able to hold and burn. So that's why it's fire for me. And I would use a wand every single time almost that I am doing magic. I often will cast a circle of some sort to kind of keep me in, keep the energy in, so it's not just kind of falling to the wayside, and to me it feels more effective, like I can keep things in this space and really compile energy for use. It keeps outside influences at bay in a way. There's just a lot to it for me, so circles and casting them, that is important for me. So I will use this with the direction of energy, so that's the biggest use I have with it, and I almost will do that pretty much anytime I'm doing any magical working or ceremony. Likewise, in say magical workings, I'll sometimes use it as almost this way to direct energy. I mean, that's usually how it's noted in, say, a book or something like that, but it's pretty important to me for that. And I'm sorry if you hear people yelling or speaking loudly downstairs. We are in the midst of a lot of people being home, so they're doing their thing. But a wand is a big one for me, and this is a new wand, and I'm really, really happy with it. I had a wand that I lost in a move when I moved from my last apartment, and this is Hawthorne. My last wand was Hawthorne, but it was a lot less elaborate and nice, but I think Hawthorne for me is a big one. I just feel very drawn to that type of wood and its correspondences, and even when I didn't know its correspondences, that was my first wand. So my second wand is also Hawthorne, and I got this on Etsy, and I'm really happy with it. And part of me almost wants to show my Athame, although I don't use it as much because I splurged and got a really nice one and my last one wasn't, and I'm just so enthralled with it. So I'll show you anyway. It's made of oak and copper, and it's just so ornate, and I'm really happy with it. It kind of looks like a leaf. So not even a tool that I use that much, but I'm just showing it off because I'm very happy and proud of it, and kind of infatuated with it at the moment. But next up, I would say, is my drum. And I wouldn't say that this is an item that I use so often, but I find it to be completely essential in magical workings, less so active magical workings like spell casting, more so in ritual high magic when I'm trying to meditate, to journey, to astral travel, and when I'm really trying to alter my state of consciousness or draw in energy. I use it almost to draw energy. And so the rhythmic and the way that I go about playing it is magical in nature. So as opposed to spell working, in a way, this is a magical tool that is used a bit differently and not quite as often. And especially when, say, all of these people are home and I'm sitting here, it would get very distracting and annoying for them if I were sitting here playing. So I do have to be cognizant of times when I can use this, which makes me think about it more, because when do I have that time where I'm alone and not going to disturb others with the use of this? So it's a big one for me. I really like this specific one. I believe it's made from a deer hide, and I got it on Etsy from a creator. Very happy with it, and yeah, so it's a big one for me. So I guess you guys are getting an idea of the types of magical workings and magical practices I'm involved in. A lot of fire, a lot of herbs, and then more shamanic practices, which is where the drum would come in, and those are not as spellcrafty in nature. Next, and a huge one for me, debatably the biggest, is parchment and a pen. This is a fountain pen that I use only for magical workings. It sits on my altar, and it's not like an extremely nice fountain pen, but the fact that I had to spend a little bit more on it, and it is a fountain pen, and I don't know, something about that made me, I needed something that I was going to leave at the altar that was, its delegated use was magic, and so this is the pen that I use. This is the primary tool, I would say, and if we're talking about, say, supply, like the herbs would be, I would consider a supply. The parchment would be a supply, because I'm constantly needing to refill it. It's not one tool that lasts, but parchment. I engage in a lot of sigil magic. Likewise, I do immediate writing, which happens, say, with like meditation, altered states, with my tarot. I'll sometimes write my own incantations, mantras, things to be repeated in a spell, and I do like to write them on, usually if it's something that's an official spell, or maybe I've done the scratch work somewhere else, I'll write it on. I have these nicer parchment pieces. They weren't too much. You could buy them for like $100 for a couple bucks on Amazon, but there are some that are really nice. To me, this does the trick, because it's more about, to me, the feeling that it evokes, and for me this looks old and nice and quality, and it takes me to this different place. So it feels like normal paper pretty much, but it looks like this. And so parchment and a pen for me are debatably my biggest magical tools. I'm constantly writing sigils and signs and coming up with my own words sometimes, or writing incantations and mantras, and sometimes I'll write long pieces that are almost odes or poems or essays that I do use in a magical way. I enjoy writing in general. I went to school for writing, and sometimes I'll also write petitions to my deities and beings I might be working with. Specifically, the one that I would be the closest to is the Sheila Nagig, and I debated bringing her statue into this, but I think that's a representation, it's not a tool, and I could work with her just the same without a representation of her, although I really enjoy having it. So that to me is not a tool, and that's why that's not in here. So I made that decision that was a different thing. Okay, 2 more left. So next I have, and this is just symbolic of the category I'm going to be speaking on, but a crystal of some sort. and I would say clear quartz actually is a big one for me, but there's always going to be at least one crystal in almost any magical working, whether it's meditation, astral traveling, journeying, altered state of consciousness, spellcraft. There's always going to be some crystal, and I recently filmed a crystal video, or at least my favorite crystals and how I use them, and I think that that'll go up before this. So if you haven't seen that one, you can look at the crystals that I'm using for the most part and how I use them. But we have this guy, this clear quartz, and I like it because it's long. I feel like I'm directing energy, and I can move and point and draw energy connections between things. Likewise, to me, clear quartz is a great amplifier, so that's the example crystal I'm using. But crystals overall are a huge part of my magical practice, so have to bring that up. And then finally, I would say another huge one that is almost this unsung hero, a lot like the mortar and pestle, is a candle. I just chose this one. It's a new moon intention candle that I bought, but a lot of the time actually I wouldn't use a candle like this in a spell. I would use a very plain candle, a votive candle, and I would either inscribe it with something, write something on it, anoint it with an oil or herbs, or a blend of that. So actually candles that have like scents and things in them are nice for atmosphere sometimes, and this one is made to actually be used magically, but I wouldn't use candles that are designed like that with scents in magic. But I did pull this one out. It was sitting under my altar, and it was the first one. So candles always, the color, different colors and sizes, and I'll anoint them, and sometimes it has to do with working with the deity, or communing, or it being a focal point, or me doing a tarot reading, or me using it to actually be part of the symbolic spell, and it's burning, and the completion of that cycle and how long it takes has a lot to do sometimes with the type of spell that I'm doing. So there's a lot that goes into that, and I don't think I think of candles enough as big tools, but it's, I would say, debatably one of the largest, along with that parchment and fountain pen. Candles would be right up there, because pretty much anytime I'm doing anything, there's a candle lit for some purpose or another. And so yeah, candles are a big one. So I would say those are my main ones. Everything else, of course, I love all of my other tools, but I think if somebody were to say pick less than 10, I think these were 8 total, less than 10 sort of tools that you have to use for a certain amount of time, these would be them. These are the ones that I'm using the most, and the others are used a little bit more sparingly. And over time, these are my tools that I'm consistently using that are very reflective of the magical practices I'm involved in. So yeah, that's that. I would love to know, again, I know I said this at the beginning, but I would love to know which ones you guys use and why, and how your magical practice has evolved, or say the kind of workings you're really into, because we're all so different, and that's part of the beauty and part of why I love being a part of a community where we can have these conversations and all get to know each other and learn and just experience different practitioners. So yeah, if you liked this, give it a like, feel free to subscribe if you'd like, and yeah, until next time, bye guys.